Hi, it's another gorgeous day, and I hope that you and your loved ones are able to enjoy some of this weather and are staying safe and sane. This week the subject of lockdown behaviour has been much in the news, and I wanted to share my perspective on it and what I've learned through this period. It started weeks ago when the issue of stockpiling first raised its head. What for some people was prudent, careful buying, to minimise the number of shopping journeys they made and to look after themselves and their family, appeared to others to be selfish and greedy behaviour that was going to disadvantage other people and stop them getting what they needed. We've then debated what's essential, what's an essential purchase, what's an essential journey, how far can you drive for exercise, and how long can you do it for once you're there. Locally, we've had lots of debates about second homes, who should be in them and who shouldn't. And through all of that, it's been really clear that people reach different conclusions based on the same information, and then once they've reached those conclusions, they behave according to the beliefs that they've formed, and they expect everybody else to do pretty similar. So why do we all end up with different beliefs? And how do we accommodate the different behaviours and the different conclusions that other people reach? Well, for a start, the same information is presented differently by different sources. For example, most of us will know that on the 30th of April, the UK government reported 122,000 tests for COVID-19 were carried out on individuals. If you read that in my wife's paper, you'd have probably seen it, like them, as a triumph for the Health Secretary, who'd set an ambitious target and achieved it against all the odds. If you read it in my paper, on the other hand, you'd be aware that 40,000 of those tests were actually not carried out at all, they were just put in the post. And of the remaining 80,000, an unspecified number consisted of counting separately a test of somebody's right nostril and of their left nostril. By the way, I deplore the fact my wife reads that paper, but I defend with my life her right to read it. Anyway, having taken in probably different information, or certainly different interpretations of information, we then process that through our values and our beliefs and our attitudes to risk, which are going to be different according to our age and our gender and our experience and the people that we know and our medical history and that of our family. And we all end up reaching different conclusions. And of course, there's the issue of biases. Confirmation bias, for example, means that if you voted for the current government, you're more likely to believe what they say. There's also that thing whereby we're all wired to believe what we want to believe. So, for example, I like bacon sandwiches. If somebody tells me that there's a scientific report that says that eating bacon is likely to harm my health, I'm less likely to believe that than a vegetarian is. So all of those experiences and beliefs and opinions and biases filter the information that we've already received that might be different from other people, and then we form our conclusions, and on our conclusions we base our behaviours. And we expect everybody else to have reached exactly the same conclusions and to behave in exactly the same way. And of course, life isn't like that. The problem comes when we use our view of the world and impose it on others and judge them for their actions without understanding what's led to them, what their context is, why they're acting the way that they are. I mentioned earlier the debate about second homes, the argument that you shouldn't be in your second home. You're putting pressure on the local supply chain, you're taking resources from the NHS locally, you could even be bringing the virus in from outside. Please stay away, you're not welcome here. That thinking led in one case to a nurse having his tyres slashed. Somebody thought he was a second homer. Turned out he was self-isolating away from his wife and kids in order not to bring the virus home from the hospital in which he was trying to save victims of COVID-19. In a less significant example, I saw a post locally on our We Love Our Village page from somebody who'd recently moved here and felt she was encountering hostility from locals. She just wanted to say, no, actually, I live here. I met her in the park the next day. She was easy to spot, new face, 3 kids, dog. She told me 2 things that were relevant. One was she'd moved on lockdown day. The chain had been agreed weeks in advance. She had no choice but to move on that day. And secondly, she'd moved, it turned out, 5 miles. No unnecessary diversion of NHS resources there. The house next door to ours is a second home. The owner's daughter and her boyfriend came down just as lockdown began. Did all the right things, kept their head down. After a couple of weeks, I managed to catch sight of her in the garden and had a quick chat. She said, "You probably resent me for coming down." I didn't, actually. But she said, "I was in a 6th floor flat in East London. I was frightened. I needed to get away." And I thought, and she's about the same age as my daughter, what would I want for my daughter in those circumstances? And what it's reinforced for me is an old lesson. I think it's from a book by Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the lesson is this: seek first to understand and then to be understood.